You know, nobody really likes half measures, but I don't really have much of a choice but to talk in half measures when I'm talking about Moon Knight. This show isn't terrible. I mean, granted, for the first few episodes, yeah, the title of this video is going to be Moon Knight Sucked, period. I'm not even joking. But the last couple episodes really pulled a hat trick and made me, have an appreciation for the show. I don't think I'm going to go back and ever watch it again, but I look forward to the next time that I see Moon Knight in a Marvel TV show or movie. So I can't really go into this with glowing praise talking about how this is the best thing Marvel's ever put on screen. It's very, very far from it. But I also can't come on this saying I'd rather watch this than Thor the Dark World. I'd rather put a pen in my eye. And yeah, I will admit, I'm honestly a little bit bummed that this show did end up pulling something off to be pretty good in some senses, because there's nothing really more clickbaity than talking about Marvel and just shitting on it, because how often do you get to do that? I mean, I love Marvel. I'm a big fanboy. I love all the shit. So when this was sucking so bad that I was putting off watching all these episodes until the day before the finale aired, I was kind of looking forward to shitting on it in a video. But, unfortunately I can't. But let's get it rolling. Now, Moon Knight is the 6th of the MCU Disney Plus TV shows that they have released, all of which I have been a rather big fan of and made videos on nearly every single one of them. Now, Moon Knight follows Stephen Grant and Mark Spector, a guy with DID, Dissociative Identity Disorder, that is the avatar and the vessel for the Egyptian god Khonshu. Now, this show starts off as a bit of a mystery. You start in the eyes of Stephen Grant, and a lot of weird things are happening to him. He suffers from sleepwalking and waking up places and doing things that he doesn't have any explanation to or any memory of, and he's a very awkward, introverted type of guy. And the mystery is what is going on in his life until one day he wakes up in a faraway place having stolen a Egyptian relic of some kind. And a guy named Arthur Harrow, who is killing people in the name of Ammit and looking to arise Ammit and become the vessel for that Egyptian god, goes after him. And that's when it all starts to unfold, that Stephen Grant and Mark Spector are this guy with DID, as I was saying. And their big mission throughout this show is to not only take down Arthur Harrow and aid Khonshu in not having the world end, but also come to terms with themselves and who they are and learn to live with each other in their same head. It's honestly super hard to explain. It took me about 15 minutes to sit in here just to figure out how to say that in decent terms, and even now I don't think I did that great with it.
Oh, that doesn't make sense to me. But then, you are very small.
Now, Moon Knight had a whole lot of obstacles to overcome as a TV show within the MCU. I mean, not only was it introducing an entirely new character, this is the very first time that an entirely new character is getting its own standalone show. Now, granted, I mean, we had Kate Bishop in Hawkeye, but she was basically a co-lead with Jeremy Renner's Clint Barton. And the last time that we had a new character introduced was in Shang-Chi, and that was like a 2.5 hour movie, whereas this is 6 full-length 1-hour episodes. And that's very difficult because for a long time we have had our established characters within Marvel, and whenever somebody new is introduced, they're introduced alongside somebody that we already know with a relation to them. So we instantly have a kind of connection with them because a character we know and love, like Clint Barton, has a connection. Or like Natasha Romanoff with Yelena Belova. You instantly like Yelena and Kate because they have connections with existing characters and heroes that we already know and love. When this does not have any of that, they are building a foundation from the ground up with Moon Knight and Stephen and Mark. On top of that, this show is basically disconnected from all canon of Marvel whatsoever. It could be in its entirely standalone TV show and not have the Marvel logo slapped in front of it, and it would still make complete sense because there's no mention of anything else. There's not a single mention of the blip. There's nothing that has to do with alternate dimensions or reality snapping or anything like that. And that's also very difficult in a time like now when you have Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and Spider-Man No Way Home and Loki that are all dealing with this big thing that's probably going to be the next big obstacle to overcome in phase 4. But bigger than all of that, in my opinion, is the fact that they are dealing with an entirely new concept within Marvel, which is Egyptian gods basically being real. I mean, go back and watch like the first Iron Man movie and go into it the lens of that in this world, Egyptian gods are the one true real god. The MCU is not a world anymore that does not have a deity. It has now been established in this universe that Egyptian gods are real and living among us and were once ruling the lands. And I can grasp that. I have no problem grasping that. I grasp interstellar travel with the Guardians of the Galaxy. I grasp Asgardian magic and gods when it comes to Thor. I have no problem with interdimensional travel with Spider-Man No Way Home, bringing in other Peters from other worlds. It's not a problem. I mean, Jesus, we have magic in this world now, you know?
Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the wizards.
It's no longer what it was with Iron Man and Captain America and Thor to a lesser extent in the Phase 1. But introducing literal gods that have been prayed to and answered prayers on Earth is a wild new addition, in my opinion. Now, like I said from the very beginning of this show isn't entirely bad. I do think that it leans a lot more bad than good, and if it wasn't for the last 2 episodes, and specifically episode 5, then this show would have been utter unwatchable trash, in my opinion.
What the fuck is this?
What? What?
What the fuck is this? This is garbage.
It's beautiful.
That's not me exaggerating for clickbait. I'm like 6 or 7 minutes into this video or something. I literally think that would have been the case if it wasn't for the final 2 episodes. But the first 4 episodes were very slow moving and boring. And it wasn't just a slow burn. It was a very tiny little sizzle that barely kept my interest. I stopped watching after the 3rd episode because I couldn't bring myself to watch any more of this show without having a conclusion of some kind, because I just didn't have the motivation. And I watched it all this morning when I woke up and realized that, oh hey, the finale's finally out. I guess I should finish that show of that universe that I love. And I think there's evidence to show that Marvel knew that this show wasn't as strong as anything else they have done, because when they released the screeners to journalists and film reviewers, they released the first 4 episodes, which is unheard of. They've been known to do 3, but usually when they release screeners, they just do the first 2 episodes. And in this, they released all 4 at the same time, which to me tells me that they know that this is one of their weaker properties that they have released. Or at least that they know that the first 4 episodes are pretty weak, because when you get to the end of episode 4, you finally have something interesting that happens. But then you need to get to episode 5 to get an answer for it.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Now, you may be asking, what are some big reasons that I can think of off the top of my head that this show isn't that good? Why is this superhero show not live up to the snuff or the hype? Well, one, there's almost no superhero in it. I understand this is an origin story. You go back and watch any of the origin stories. It's not like they hop into their super suit in the beginning. Usually they get into their super suit in like the 2nd to the 3rd act or whatever. And, you know, I can live with that. But let's say this show is 5.5 hours long. They're about like 45, 50, 55-minute episodes. I would say in total, the Moon Knight character had about 20 minutes of screen time throughout all of those episodes. And when he was on screen, it was really, really cool, especially in the last episode. Fucking phenomenal. Great time watching that, and I will get to that. But Moon Knight himself had almost no screen time whatsoever. There was an entire episode, maybe 2 if I'm remembering correctly, that he didn't have anything at all in it. On top of that, the Moon Knight comic has always been known to be darker and grittier and scarier. And when they were talking about this show, they were talking about how this is Marvel venturing into the horror genre, how this will be darker and grittier and scarier. And you know what? I'm a little bitch boy when it comes to horror. When I watched It Follows years ago, I got nightmares. You know, I never stopped getting nightmares. I still get nightmares from It Follows. That shit freaked me out. I look down the road, I see somebody walking, I'm like, that's the STD monster coming to rip my face off, you know? But this, I didn't even get startled. Not once. I watched this in bed in the dark when the rest of my family was asleep with headphones on. This should have been prime territory to scare the living fuck out of me. But not once did I even jump. There were moments that it was obvious that they were trying to get me there, but it never succeeded. It never could go all the way. It was too afraid to venture away from the Marvel formula, which I get because the Marvel formula is tried and true, and it's worked for them for over a decade. But if you only half-ass something, I'm only gonna like it. Does that make sense?
Never half-ass 2 things. Whole-ass 1 thing.
But because they were trying for this bit of horror, this bit of gritty, this bit of dark, they really lessened the the jokes and the levity. And I understand why they did, but because they only had half the jokes and half the horror, the jokes didn't really land and none of the horror landed. So in the end, you're just left blank face watching this show and you're not feeling anything. But then with that, you run into the problem of how are they going to fit this guy into the rest of the MCU? Next time they do a team-up movie, whether it's Avengers or something else, try and picture in your mind Moon Knight running around with everybody else that you know, and you can't do it. I can't picture Tom Holland running around with Moon Knight and quipping with him. He has some of his funny moments and some of his quips. Maybe Stephen Grant could fit in there a little bit better. But in the end, the tone was so weird in this show that I don't see it meshing well unless some big changes are made. I want to talk about why this show was ultimately saved from being the dumpster fire that I thought that it was going to be for weeks on end. And that is episode 5 and episode 6. And episode 5 is a damn trip to watch and hard to explain. So the end of episode 4, Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, whoever, both of them, all of them together, they die and they go to the middle place between the afterlife and death, which of course, now that we've learned that Egyptian gods are the actual gods, is the in-between plane where they get to know if they are going to go to heaven, basically, or hell, basically. And Mark and Steven are told that they have to balance their scales with a feather, which was an old Egyptian thing. That's actually very accurate. There's a lot of things in this, by the way, that are very accurate to Egyptology. I'm a little bit of a fan of Egyptology. I read some books about it, and seeing the accuracy in this and the care they took with a lot of the stuff, and granted it's Marvel, so they do take some liberties, but not a lot, and it's really cool to see that. But they have to explore their life, Mark's life and Steven's life, and see where they mingle and see why they are intersecting now. And they have to reveal these aspects to each other that the other one doesn't know. Specifically, Mark has to reveal to Steven the tragic story of how he blames himself for his little brother's death. And watching that scene brought me to tears. Like, quite literally brought me to tears. I had to pause the show and I had to leave for a bit. It hit me in a very deep and emotional place. But beyond that, this episode is so trippy, jumping in between the literal middle ground between life and death, talking to an Egyptian god and going between different planes of existence and jumping in between different sectors of their minds and points of view. And it's really, really good and something I have never seen or never thought I would see within Marvel. So this really made me sit up on the couch and be like, okay, they are doing something here. And then when episode 6 rolls around, and basically the entire episode is a giant fight sequence between a 40-foot tall Khonshu and a 40-foot tall Ammit, and also in between Harrow as the vessel for Ammit and Steven and Mark as the vessel for Khonshu, and then Mark's wife, or Steven's wife, also their wife Layla, being the vessel for a hippo god that I cannot remember the name of, but she's badass, and I hope she continues to be her own hero within the MCU. I fully support her. She is fucking awesome. She could carry her own property, no problem. But the beautiful thing about this final episode, and what it got me thinking about, is that this show basically flipped the entire Marvel third act problem on its head. This show does not have a third act problem like almost every other property in Marvel does. This show has an act 1 problem, an act 2 problem, but a fucking phenomenal third act. There's no light beam into space. There's no giant CGI battle between an expendable army. There's the fight between the 2 literal gods, but it's just 2 of them, and then the fight between the 3 vessels that are trying to save the world. And granted, it is giant stakes. Again, at this point, nothing in Marvel can be small stakes. They can never have a battle for downtown New York unless you're literal Hawkeye and you have bows and arrows and you're fighting a mafia that only wears tracksuits. I rag on it, but I fucking love the Hawkeye show. It's great. But beyond the great fighting that you can actually follow that's not against an expendable army, you also have really, really good closure between Mark and Steven, where the entire show they're fighting back and forth between who has control of the body, but now they have reconciled with this, and they are, for lack of a better term, friends, and using the body together and using each other's strengths and weaknesses together to balance out and be this perfect Moon Knight hero. And then when the show finally ends, with everybody getting defeated and the world not being plunged into chaos and ended, because of course, I mean, it can't end literally any other way. It ends on a really good cliffhanger with this idea that maybe there is a third personality within them, and you're wanting to see how he's going to get the Moon Knight costume and the Moon Knight powers back because he forfeited it back to Khonshu, and it left me speechless. I went from hating this show to being excited to see where Moon Knight goes again. Now, granted, like I said, I'm never going to watch this show again. Maybe I'll watch the final episode right before Moon Knight is in something else, but I'm not going to watch the rest of the show again. There's 4 hours of my life that just dragged on beyond belief that I only kept with because I watch every Marvel property. I'm stupid loyal. They got me wrapped around their little fucking pinky finger. But it flipped it around, and you see me here excitedly talking about these final 2 episodes. So, not for nothing, it accomplished that. But thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my other videos.